All right, so we're here today to talk about motivational interviewing. I know most, if not all of you, have been exposed to some parts of motivational interviewing. Today, we're going to focus on advice giving and sabotaging our instinct to give advice and the ways that we can, when we would give advice, what are productive ways that we can still engage the youth about whatever change they're hoping they're going to make, we're hoping they're going to make those healthy life choices. So my hope is that we can start by just checking in about where each of you is at in terms of what about MI do you feel like pretty confident in, or you feel like you have some not standing knowledge, and maybe where do you see a gap in where you're at in MI, and just see how people are doing in terms of what they feel about their own knowledge.
I'm going to say mine's pretty low at this point. I mean, I've been having this is my first class with you guys, so learning.
So you're new to it?
But I'm a parent, so used to listening to kids and talking with them and trying to pick out what's important. So
maybe some natural skill sets, especially from being a parent, but you're ready to learn. Oh, and so one thing, as I'm repeating some of what you say back into the mic, it's an example of reflective listening or reframing of what you're doing, which is part of what we want to do in MI too.
So as I start into a conversation with a teen, whether it's at the house or with my own family, because I have teenage grandchildren and younger, I can begin, and then I find myself slipping back into old habits. So I try really hard with the reflective listening, and then pretty soon they ask for advice and I fall for it, or I give advice and they fall for it.
So you feel like you have some good skills in beginning the conversation and starting your interactions, but it's hard for you to carry it through a whole conversation, and you are looking for ways to sabotage maybe that advice giving.
Exactly.
I still feel a lack of a basis, in the sense that going where once a week there are some of the same teens there, but then also not. And I like to be relevant, and when I don't know them, or a lot of the ones I see on a regular basis, I still don't know what their goals are. Because we talked about this, and I just feel like we're really at a loss. We could be more effective with MI and other things if we could have the notes of the goal sheet like we used to have. Because I don't want to talk about something that they don't want to talk about or comment about it. Now, we've had some teams with some very heavy things that have taken place, and we were told, do not talk to so-and-so about this at all. Fine, that's fine. But, okay, then what do we talk about with some of the other teens? How do we encourage them when we see them week after week playing video games the whole time we're there? And we don't know what their problem is, how to encourage them, or anything, because there's just they're just like I don't even know what to say. I don't want to be offensive, but I mean, they're just there.
So
and I want to have more. I want to have more influence,
So you want to have more influence, you want better strategies for engaging the youth, whether they're new youth to you or ones you've seen over and over again. And maybe sometimes you're frustrated when it's hard to tell what is going on in their life and what's appropriate to talk to them about.
Exactly, yeah. And really, how do you encourage them, or what to avoid, what subjects to avoid, and
Yeah. Thank you, Benny, for sharing.
yeah.
I feel kind of in between, like Wendy and Benny. Feel just personality-wise, I'm noticing myself getting to start to do reflective listening almost more in my personal life than at the house. I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing. Where I'm like, oh, it sounds like blah, blah, blah. But I also feel like what Benny's saying is that I don't feel like I've actually really been engaged with someone for several months because I don't know what topics to bring up. I don't know how to start something. I don't know what's a sore spot and what's something that needs to be fleshed out. When someone's griping, does that mean they're griping because they don't want to talk about it or because they need to be heard? And what are the skills beyond just that very beginning opening of like, hey, sounds like you're having a bad day. I don't know where to go from there because then I just kind of jump into like, well, you should do this. So yeah, more understanding of the principles and examples and consistent training, and then also consistent understanding of what's actually going on.
I was just reflecting what Teresa's saying, sort of in between what Betty and Wendy were feeling okay about some of the base reflective skills, but still wanting to be able to engage more and go deeper into those conversations while maintaining with these skills. And we got someone else joining us. Hello.
Is the car ready?
It sure is. So we're just going around and talking about, sort of got most of the way through the room. This training's on motivational interviewing and where you feel like you're at with your skills in terms of motivational interviewing so far, what you feel like you do know and what you're hoping to gather in this training. Put you on the spot.
I guess what I would hope to gather is there's always that kind of that awkward piece where the person feels safe enough to be able to open up to you, and finding ways to be able to get to that place quicker. And I guess I'm an introvert, so if I follow some formula of what to say, it feels real clunky because I would rather not be talking anyway. I'd rather be
and my rocks for introverts. So, yeah,
And what's your name?
Jay.
Great. So, and I'm repeating what people are saying back into the mic because we got one mic. But so you're working on increasing your engagement with the youth, and you're looking for maybe more of a roadmap of where to go in those interactions.
Right, how to open up that dialogue.
Open up the dialogue. Yeah. So in our training today, like we said, we're going to focus mostly on times when you would be invited to give advice, either because you want to give advice or the youth is asking for advice. In a previous training, we talked about a lot about reflective listening and open-ended questions, and a lot of times those can be the skills that can be most helpful in beginning those conversations. So this focus is going to be on the advice piece, so it may not hit every one of your goals, but I hope that it's a good next step in your skill building.
All right, so we're gonna kind of go over the spirit of MI. Again, we're looking for that collaboration piece, so it's not like us as the experts. We're kind of working together with the youth I talk with my hands. We're working together with the youth to kind of collaborate and kind of, figure out where they are together. So we're all on the same page, with really the youth leading it is kind of what we're looking for. And then evocation, we really want to pull those answers and things from the youth. So kind of what do they want to talk about? What do they not want to talk about? I think that's an appropriate question to ask them. And so we're kind of trying to pull those answers from them and help them kind of be their own advocates for themselves. Like, I do want to talk about this now, I don't want to talk about this now. And then we can use these skills to kind of pull those answers from youth. And then the last one is autonomy. So again, it's up to them. They're making the life choices for themselves. And so we really, as much as possible, want to empower them in those decisions. So when we kind of tell them what to do, that takes away some of the power of what they're going to do. And so that's why we're here today, to kind of sabotage advice, because they call it, maybe we're not there yet. They call it a reflex, the writing reflex. So it's something you feel kind of instinctively. You want to tell them what to do, help them out, help them to make the best choice. But what we're really trying to do is give that over to them. So we'll talk a little bit about information giving or sharing today, but mostly we want to equip them with what they need to make the decision for themselves. And then the principles of MI. So we're going to try and do this together. So if anyone remembers these acronyms, we can start with ORS because it's easier. What does the O stand for in ORS?
Observe. I'm guessing. I don't remember ever doing this acronym thingy.
Okay. Yes, different if you missed part 1. Any other guesses? All right.
We'll go with observe.
I like openness.
Yeah, so O stands for open-ended questions. So that's one tool you can use in your MI toolkit. A, any guesses for A? Assess. Active listening. So it's actually affirmation. Yes. So yeah, we just kind of... And affirmations, there's a lot of reflective... Okay, what's R? Yeah, reflective listening. So...
What's an affirmation? Is an affirmation you're right, or is an affirmation I hear you, I see, okay?
Right. So you're kind of affirming that you're understanding, and then sometimes you're like,
It's like pulling out a strength.
right. So I see that this is really something you're passionate about, or that you're really strong at standing up for yourself.
I hate it when people say that to me because I'm like, you don't know me.
Right.
You're just saying things based on one story that I'm telling you.
Right. So, I mean, it's a tool to use as you see fit. And I think, so if you see someone react like that, you're probably not going to do that again. Like, okay, I saw that you weren't super into that comment, so I'm probably going to not do that anymore if that's all right with you. And then S stands for summarizing. So summarizing is kind of advanced reflective listening. So when you're doing this reflective listening piece, it's kind of like one word maybe, or one sentence, or like, I'm hearing you say this, or sounds like you're feeling this. And then summaries are like, you just had a conversation and you're going to say like, oh, we kind of talked about this. I heard you say this. You're going to decide this. Your next step is this. You're kind of summarizing the whole conversation.
So could you do another example of the open-ended questions?
Sure. You want to just talk about something?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about this before, but I'm going to talk and you're going to ask me open questions. Cool. Gotcha. Talk about something.
What did you do today?
Yeah, so I had a pretty good day, but I felt like I was running around a lot, and, I just did not give myself a lunch, and I had at least, too much coffee and not enough food this morning, too, and so, wow, it's just been a long day for me so far.
Yeah. So what do you think happened with your lunch?
I didn't prioritize it, and really I need to schedule it in my day. But okay, so what do you think happened is an open-ended question, whereas a close-ended question that Sam could have asked instead would be like, did you get too busy to have lunch? And that's a yes or no question. So open-ended questions are usually questions that start with either what or how or why or where, and can't be answered with a yes or a no. So like, did you have a good day is a yes or no question, but how was your day is an open-ended question. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, and then what did you do today?
Yeah, what did you do today? Also open-ended.
Yeah, so those are the ORs, and then some more principles of MI. R would be resist the writing reflex. So that's that, like, you says something about going out, and you're like, okay, please be safe, and don't drink, and just that instinct in you that's like, okay, I want to help you make this decision. Or even if they pull for advice, sometimes they're like, hey, Wendy, what do you think I should do about this? And then you're like, great, I want to tell you all the things I think you should do in this situation. But just that feeling you kind of get, we want to try and, of solving the problem for them. We want to resist that, and we'll talk a little bit about why in a minute. U would be understanding the client's motivation. So again, in order to be effective with MI, we really have to understand what's going on. And I understand why you experience some frustration there, because, yes.
And I'm in the same boat.
Sure.
specific
Mhm.
about what the teens go on,
Mhm.
is, it would really be helpful.
Mhm.
It can take me weeks to get a feel for the direction the kid seems to be going in.
Mhm.
And that isn't even the goal.
Right, right. So it's frustrating when we are having a hard time figuring out what direction the youth are going in and what kind of conversations they're open to having. So that's all in here. So we use like these two primarily, open-ended questions and reflections, to kind of gauge where the youth is at. So through those things and through their reactions and really paying attention and active listening and like using so just calling out what you see a lot. So if you see someone react like that to an affirmation, like be like, hey, seems like something happened there with that comment. Like, what was that about, or something.
I'm wondering though if the point of view we're coming from is more of like not necessarily a lack of volunteer youth communication, but a lack of staff volunteer and volunteer communication, where maybe they're getting asked the same question 15 times in 4 days because we don't individually have just a basic
Roadmap.
Consistent way to communicate with each other. Like, I talked to this person about this, it's a touchy subject, and then the next person can be like, okay, next subject, or yeah. So then we're all going in there asking the same person the same question, bringing up the same sensitive subject, and none of us ever get the chance to like sneak in, to where they're open.
Great example. Like, there's a teen right now whose first name begins with a J, who is touchy about food that is offered to him at the house and prefers to buy it and cook it himself. So I was exploring what he likes to eat and the way that he's learned to cook, and affirming that that seemed like a very good way to move towards independence, although choosing food could be a little different. I wonder how many times that particular teen has had somebody approach him in the same way. And it may not be useful to do that time after time after time.
So there's some, frustration and worry that youth are getting asked the same questions over and over because you start from scratch each time, kind of thing.
I would say that, so right now, neither Sam or I work full-time at the teen shelter. And so I just want to acknowledge that right now we're not really in a position to make assurances or promises or changes in that. I really encourage you guys to go to Sharon, our current volunteer coordinator, with your specific feedback about what would be helpful to you as volunteers. And that's really the best place to... I know we have the activity logs where you write your shift notes, but often those aren't super detailed, and that can be difficult. And there have been times in the past where it's been easier to access their goal notes. I do want to say that in this training, Sam and I can really validate where you're coming from and hear you, and even work with you to brainstorm some solutions, but right now our roles in the organizations don't lend them to solving that problem or using our writing reflex here, which, so I want to acknowledge that. But what we can do is help equip you guys with tools that will hopefully start to make it easier to be engaging with youth in authentic ways, and to, when you are having this opportunity to have a conversation with a teen about their food choices, skills that might help you carry that conversation farther or potentially allow it to be more useful for the youth. And I know that you all are volunteers because you care and you want to be helpful in the youth's lives. And our other job here in this training is to show that things that just being that reflective or affirming listening voice, we know through research that these skills do help the well-being of our youth. And we've seen it pan out in our programs as well.
So I guess we can move to L, which would be just listening. listening to the youth. And that involves like interpreting body language and stuff too. And then E, I think, is empathy. Empowering. Yeah, so again, yes. Yeah, so we want to, just making sure that we are not being the expert person, that we're consulting them too and empowering them to make those choices. Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty lucky because I'm there in the mornings from 7 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And so either most of them are asleep and I get one-on-one a lot with them, and then most of our conversations are about going to school
Mm-hmm.
and whether we're not going to do that today. And I felt really good because then Jay the other day did go to school after a long conversation we had, and after a lot of cussing and grumbling about it, he actually got his little butt up and went. But like I said, I'm feeling really, really good because I don't have these bigger conversations. They're too tired, or new music on, head down. But when we do have conversations, they're good. So.
Right. So in the morning time when you're one-on-one, it's kind of easier to have those
There's
things.
some other teens around to listen
Right.
to things they say, and sometimes they can just complain openly, which I listen.
Right.
Sometimes we laugh.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Why not advice?
Yeah, so I guess here we're today trying to think of sabotaging advice. So why do you guys think we want to avoid that writing reflex?
So they can have the tools to have their own understanding of how to solve problems.
Right. So
Like when they leave us.
right. So for the long term, we're equipping them to be able to do those things for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think the old thumb or rule of thumb would be end all unsolicited advice is criticism. At any point we start to go to writing before they're looking for the writing, then we're criticizing.
Okay. So if the youth's not ready to receive it, it comes across as criticism.
I like that.
If they learn
Your
a
grandmother
lesson,
didn't tell you that? Your grandmother told me that a lot.
No, I've never heard that at all.
I've never heard that at all, and it just.
Can you say it one more time, Jay?
So it's all unsolicited advice is criticism.
All unsolicited advice is criticism.
It's like fortune cookie wisdom.
Any other reason? I know that's hard to top. Any other reasons we might want to avoid advice giving?
Just because we aren't their person, we're not their advocates, and so maybe some of their goals or some of their thoughts need to be discussed with the advocate and not with me, who spends 4 hours a week there and doesn't know anything about their situation. So
Yeah, and I would say that we really don't want advocates giving advice either. And we want our, whether it's the advocate, the case manager, the program coordinator, the volunteer, really agency-wide, we want to take a shift away from giving advice and more into this other MI-based system of still talking about options and sharing some information, but it's sharing, it's not criticizing or just instructing. The other big reason that I've seen to not give advice is because if you give someone advice and then they follow it and goes really well, then what's going to happen?
come back and back again.
Right, they're going to start to rely on you and again not have those tools for themselves. And what happens if you give them advice and it doesn't go well? Exactly. It could really damage the relationship if they perceive that you gave them advice and then it blows up in their face. And of course, we can't see the future. And so it's a way of not only equipping them, but allowing that to continue to be a healthy, ongoing relationship where you're a support for them, but they're not relying on you for instruction or advice in an unhealthy way.
maybe we could say to them, I'm sure once you get into that situation or that circumstance, you'll be able to figure it out. And if not, we'll be here then, so that there's the opportunity to to help them if they need it, so that they don't feel like they're just, there's no lifelines out there.
Yeah, you want to let them know that you can be there and you're a person to talk to, and they're of course we still want to be supports for our youth and portray that we're there, and like gosh, I mean, I hope the House a Safe Place is around forever, right? And that is not going anywhere, and even after people leave our building, we continue to provide ongoing support for those who want it.
My advice is still always go to school.
Right. Exactly. The advice is always going to be go to school.
Why not just drop out and get your GED? We've had that conversation too. Like, it's an option, but God, going to school is more fun.
So one thing as we talk about finding different ways to interact with our youth than give advice is by sort of understanding some of the maybe underlying assumptions that come out when we do give advice or don't. And so Sam's going to share some of those.
All right. So kind of when we're thinking about what our role is for youth, some of the traps can be, again, that we are that expert person. And then the tip that this book gives is that you might have some expertise, but clients are expert on themselves, right? So that's where the collaboration piece comes in. So you're like, I might have some information to give, but they're going to know if that's going to work for them or not, or if they've already tried it, or yes.
But if they're not, because
They're not an expert on themselves.
I mean, like, I don't know, that's kind of hard to say. Like, they're going to know if it's going to work for them. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a feeling. Mm-hmm. But if they really haven't, like, and I mean, I've been there. Like, people have told me, like, these are the things. This is how people work. Like, these are the steps you need to take. I'm like, it won't work for me because I'm too, you know, like.
How'd you figure that out?
I don't know, it just took a while for me to finally decide I wanted to do something about it.
Okay. Yeah, and like it does take time to figure it out. And you're right, maybe they don't like always know what is and isn't going to work for them, and maybe they're unwilling to try at that point. But I guess what happens if we give them advice when they're not open to trying things? What do you think?
Now, last week we were in pairs and trying to not give advice to the other person, but
We'll try that again.
Yeah. We'll have tons of practice.
you know, and the interesting thing is, as the recipient with Benny, sorry, I think of Bernadette, so I'm sorry. With Benny gently nudging me towards considering change. And you know what, that conversation, I've been working on it.
I struggled so much, I didn't know what I was saying.
But honestly, getting my own thoughts out in front of me, because she was encouraging me to think about it. It's a matter of paying attention when I drive, folks, rather than entertaining two other projects in my mind while I drive. I actually am working on it better than I did before.
Why do you think that is?
Because just the conversation was helpful, and so I'm thinking that in your situation, when you were thinking, oh, nothing will help, you know, there is a point of readiness to take it another step inside you, and what we can do is offer to teens the opportunity to reflect. And who knows whether it'll work in a week or two. I don't know how much time it took you for a particular project, but it's just a thought. Yeah.
That's really cool that a conversation you had in a training is creating some change in your own life.
And then next is like, what kind of information do I pursue? And so one of the traps is I collect information about problems. And one of the tips is I find out what information clients want and need. And so we're trying to figure out, are they ready? Where are they at? In terms of accepting some sort of information that you might have to pass that maybe will help them. But if they're in the this is criticism stage, then they're not going to hear that. So we want to find out what information our clients want and need. How do you use that information? So a trap would be I rectify gaps in knowledge. So again, youth is here. You're kind of filling in maybe some gap in logic or something that you're seeing.
Like maybe an example of that is like, but don't you know if you miss a lot of school, then you might have to drop out? Or, but if you don't get your high school degree, it's so much harder to get a job. And so you're trying to like fill those gaps, what you assume are gaps in their knowledge. It's one of the traps.
And then where the tips, I match information to clients' strengths and needs. Right, so there's just a lot of assumptions there in the gap that maybe they do already know that it's harder to get a job if they don't have their high school degree, but that's not the reason, like they're not going to school. And so by filling in those gaps, you might be giving them information that they already have, but that's not the information that they need at that moment. What is helpful? So one of the traps is that frightening information is helpful. You can scare them straight. And then one of the tips is that clients can tell me what kind of information is helpful. Again, that empowerment piece. So we want to equip them to be like, hey, this is helpful or this isn't. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then kind of what is your task in these conversations? One of the traps is I just need to tell clients what to do. One of the tips is I offer advice that champions clients' strengths and needs. Right, so we want to give advice when they're ready, maybe not give advice, but offer information when they're ready, and suited to their strengths and needs. So,
yeah. So as we're moving away from this advice paradigm and trying to tailor our conversations to respect where our teens are at in terms of the information they're looking for and figure out what they think is going to be helpful. We have a couple more acronyms. MI loves acronyms that are going to help structure these conversations. So first, we're going to talk about sort of the broad structure of a conversation, or that can help with the structure of a conversation where you might feel invited to or compelled to give advice, and then some tools that can sort of guide that process. And then after we talk about these, we're going to do a little group project where we're going to read some paragraphs of advice and figure out how we might alter that to be less directive in terms of advice, but still get at the same problems. Okay? So the EP is just like the structure of the conversation. And so it's elicit, provide, and then elicit. So elicit is just like hearing from the youth. So in the beginning, we can't have this conversation with them if we don't know where they are. We often say we want to meet them where they're at, and to figure out where they're at in terms of a conversation, it means we can ask them pretty direct questions about that. So usually when you're having these skills, there's maybe already some context for a topic. Maybe that's buying all their own food and cooking it themselves. Maybe that's going to school. So if it's okay, I'm going to run with the school example. I feel like that's, we can all imagine like a youth who is ambivalent or doesn't really want to go to school, whether it's one of our teens or anyone else in the valley. So when we're listening, we want to figure out what do they already know about this situation and what information do they already have. And then also, what info do they want? So what do they already have and what do they already want? So some ways that you could phrase this around this school example are something like, what do you know about what your consequences might be if you didn't go to school today? Or what do you know about how not graduating from school might affect your future? And so again, we're using these open-ended questions. So you're not asking, would it be good if you went to school today, which is a yes or no question, but inviting them to tell you their knowledge and experience about going to school.
I made him call the school. I made him call the school. Oh. He wanted to know what his consequences are if he didn't go. And I said, well, I can't answer that. Call the school office and find out. And he did, and found out that he needed to go.
Right, yeah. So, like, do you know about the consequences of not going to school? In this case, he didn't. And so...
He had a pretty good idea. He had a really good idea. But he wanted somebody to tell him for sure, and I was like, call the school.
Right, yeah.
I'm a big boy now, or you want to be, so...
And so really this first part is giving us the context to even understand what information is going to be helpful. Like Sam was saying, you don't want to assume the gaps in knowledge because then you're just potentially overloading them with information that they already know, and they're like, oh, this person's just telling me the same thing I've heard all the time, or they're not ready to hear it. And yeah, what information do they want? So maybe you were like, hey, what's the consequences? And they're like, oh, I don't know. You say, oh, it sounds like you want to find out what the consequences are to getting to school. Does that make sense that we're eliciting it?
But that's the same thing that I heard Jay say. Maybe saying, it sounds like you want to know the consequence wasn't really what they were saying to you.
You say, would it be helpful to know the consequence?
That might be a better way
Yeah,
to say it.
rather than first we seem kind of backed into it.
Okay, sure. That's good feedback. Thank you. So maybe even a more true way is, would it be helpful to know this information? And again, we're respecting their autonomy to be able to choose whether to receive your information or not, and try to empower them, for instance, to find out the information themselves, or even just identify themselves where their gaps in the knowledge is. Yeah, thank you guys. The second part is provide. So that's where you're actually able to provide some information. And so we want to talk about this in the context of providing information instead of giving advice. And so the way that it helps me to differentiate those for myself is thinking about a lack of judgment. So one thing that I see go hand in hand with advice is, this is what I think and you should do this. Sort of the idea that like this is the right answer, or this means you should go along and do this. So when we're providing the information, we want to do that in a specific way. So we want to offer it. We don't want to impose the information.
Would this be helpful?
Yeah, the would this be helpful? So that's again in the elicit. Also around the elicit, find out if they want the information before you give it. So if you did know the consequences for not going to school, you say something like, well, you don't want to go to school today. I know what some of the consequences are for that. Would it be helpful for me to share those with you? Is it like a way to find out if they're receptive? Ask permission, especially if they haven't asked again. Again, would it be okay if I shared this with you? Provide information in the context of other people. So say, I've heard, a lot of teens struggle going to school, but one of the consequences that I've seen other people have when they don't go to school is it's a lot harder for them to graduate, or they end up not getting their degree at all, or whatever you've seen. So putting it in a less personalized context. Give the teens permission to disagree with you. So that can be something like, this may or may not be helpful, but, or I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, or you may not agree with me on this. So it's okay to sort of couch it a little bit and give them that permission to be like, you're right, I don't agree with you. Or like, yeah, that was super not helpful. But if you're acknowledging that to them ahead of time, then it's just maybe letting them feel safer expressing really where they are at in whatever decision they're making.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of walks the line of like dismissing the validity of the information versus being empathetic to where they actually are.
Right. So I'm not saying you have to say, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but it may or may not be helpful to them, right? So acknowledging that you understand that they might just sort of in one ear out the other and need to blow you off, I've seen that really be valuable in building that rapport with a youth and building that connection. So it is okay to be careful that you're not like completely negating the information that you're about to give. But maybe, they are really focused on their immediate needs and they really couldn't care less about what their job is in 5 years at that moment. And so we respect the youth by acknowledging that may not be where they're at in the moment. That makes sense.
I think too that they're likely to do that anyways. Like, right, they're going to, maybe if you don't give them permission to be like, yes or no, I agree with you, then you might not know that, they're not hearing it or that's not where they're at. So by voicing something out there, they're able to voice it back. And then that might give you a better idea of like, okay, they're ready to hear this information or they're not, or I missed what they need, or I missed the information that they're looking for here. If that makes sense. It's like some sort of feedback for us too, to know if we're on it and with them or if we're not.
Yeah, and so the other things, reflective statements are still really appropriate when we're talking about this. So if they've expressed like, maybe I do want to go to school today and maybe I don't, we're going to say like, you're sort of thinking back and forth between you want to go to school both ways. So still bringing those reflective statements back into this conversation, and invite the youth to decide what the information means for them. So you can say, I know a concept, and they've gotten permission, you've given them permission to, they've given you permission to share like what the consequence is, and you're like, well, it probably means that you're going to be suspended or fail this class. They still need to decide what that information means for them. It might mean, I never really liked math anyways, and I'm going to pick a different elective. It might mean, that class is really important to me and I better go do it. But we still want to keep our judgments about, suspension is really bad and we need to avoid it at all costs out of the conversations, because maybe they're okay if they're suspended. And that's still not my favorite choice for them, but again, it's not my choice, it's their choice. So we have elicit, what information do they have or want? Provide, so we want to give info, not advice or judgment. And again, we're doing that in the context of other youth. So what I've seen with other youth, when they don't go to school, they get suspended, or also give it in a way that's more like normatively based or based in fact. Like maybe I'm making this statistic up, but maybe you have access to something like, when kids get suspended, they're a lot less likely in general to be able to eventually graduate. And so again, you're not making it specific about the youth, but you're sort of norming out the information in a more neutral way. And then, so that's provide. Okay, and then the last elicit is eliciting their response to the information you gave. So that's so what do you think about that? Or how does that idea land with you? Or even just, so what do you think about what I just said? And so the important thing here is that you're bookending it with sort of their thoughts and feelings. Again, going back to the spirit of MI, which is evocation, so hearing from them their experience. So asking what information they already have and what information they need, being able to give that information in a non-judgmental way, and then asking them sort of straight up how they're receiving that information. Does that make sense as a general structure to how you might go about a situation where you otherwise would just be like, well, my advice is that you go to school today.
So you're hoping in the conversation with the person in front of you, with the team, you're hoping to get some movement towards change,
Yeah.
their chosen goal. But there's also the possibility that there won't be any change.
Yes, so we're hoping for change. There's always the possibility there won't be change. And, so a really important value for us in the organization and in MI is that we're here to support our youth, but they're the ones driving the change for themselves. And that we believe that they have the strength and the ability within themselves to change, but they're still the ones who have to act on it. And, sometimes they're not ready to. And we're hoping through some of these conversations, we're helping them consider their options in a thoughtful way, and that will make it easier for them to move towards healthy change. Yeah, so the other acronym that's going to help us in these conversations, and like I said, we're going to do some breakouts and partner work here in a bit. The first one is FIRST. Ask permission. So again, hey, is it okay if we talk about this? Or is this something that can work for you? I'm sorry, can you? Here we go. Oh, the second one is offer ideas. So you can remember we're offering in sort of a neutral way, but we're not telling you, oh, you should do this. So you could go to school today, and how do you think that would work out? Or you could not go to school today, and how might that work out? So you're offering the different ideas, but you're not telling them what to do. We want to be concise. So, if you can sort of fit it concisely or into a short couple sentences, they're going to stay with you better. Versus if you go on in a 5-7 minute ramble about how school's super important and, if only you had had better attendance when you were in high school and what if this happens and what if that happens, you're going to lose them. And you're not going to be able to as effectively get your points across about, are there consequences? What are they? Are they acceptable to you? What do you want to do in this situation? So you just want to be sort of concise. I'm not very good at being concise. It's something I'm working on it.
There's 10 days left in this school year. You can finish up the 10 days, or we can do the whole semester again.
That's a pretty concise.
Think about it. Think about it.
Yeah. Use a menu. So that's something that we're not going to use too much. It's mostly like if you're but being able to a menu just laying out the different options. So we can do this, we can do that, we can do this. So like you can, for the food, you can continue to cooking your food yourself. You can cook a meal for the rest of the house, help grocery shop for the food that is in the house, and again, sort of just helping lay out their options. And then S is solicit what they think. So again, what do you think about that? How is this landing with you? Does this change your thinking at all? And again, just hearing from them what they think. Just one now. Yeah. Yeah, so this is sort of the framework that we want to use as we're moving away from advice giving and towards offering helpful information in a way that the youth is ready for, and then we can gauge the response of the team that we're working with. Any questions before we move on to shifting some little paragraphs from advice to things more in line with these skills and values?
I'm wondering about just like the very, very beginnings of starting the conversation. Come in and you're like, hi, check your pockets, did you have dinner, blah, blah, blah. And then they just go sit down and watch TV, or they just go sit down and do whatever and start looking at their phone. Like, how can you like, a lot of times I don't want to say like, what did you do today? Because it might have been the worst day ever, you know? And so unless I'm at the point where I kind of know them and can gauge their moods, like I don't say, how are you and how was your day and what did you do today? So how do you kind of start, especially with someone you might not know as well, like what are some good openings to maybe get them away from just like walk in the door and ignore you?
So, I will share with you some of the phrases I've used in the past that have worked for me, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that even though it doesn't feel, and I've been there on shift too, and it's not my program anymore, so I'm only there a couple times a month, and I don't have the relationships with the youth staying at the house, a safe place that I used to. And I really hear that it can be frustrating when they're not wanting to engage.
I'm second tier today, so I have to take this.
But sometimes it's really hard to be okay that they don't want to talk to us, and sometimes that needs to be okay, that they don't always want to engage.
I'm like way more into like, okay, if you don't want to talk, then I'm not going to talk to you.
Okay, so what are the...
Instead of like, maybe there's an opportunity here and I just don't know how to open it up.
Yeah, so I think it's always good to try it. So these are some things that I use to try to open it. What are you working on this afternoon? Or what do you want to be working on this afternoon? So again, not asking them how their day was, but what they want to be doing going forward in the day, I find is a really good place to start. Do you have any plans for the evening? Or is there something that you're looking forward to later this week? And sort of those forward-facing questions, because they might bring in their goals, their more formal goals for the week. Yeah, I'm working on taking my driver's permit test. I'm really nervous about it. Or just, yeah, I'm excited to go hang out with friends tonight. And even if it's, I'm excited to go hang out with friends tonight, I think there's still opportunity there. And you can ask them something like, oh, that's really neat. Friends are, like, reflect that. Sounds like you're excited to spend time with people who are important to you. And are you guys looking to figure out something new to do together? Or like, what might you guys be doing? Or like, and sort of feel it out that way, right? So I think asking about their future plans. Yeah, and when you start asking about their future plans, that's when those goals are going to start coming in that you're looking for. Yeah, sweet. Yeah, so, Sam had to duck out. But, so we have two little paragraphs here, and they're not the problem, but they're like a paragraph of someone giving advice. And then our goal is to talk about how we could make this less advice giving, still focus on the same topic with whoever the youth is or the teen is that we're talking to, but use more of this framework. So our first scenarios, it's about a theoretical youth or a theoretical teen who is taking their antidepressants irregularly. So this may not be like a conversation you would have in the kitchen with someone, but we can sort of imagine youth that are dealing with this sort of issue. So I can fix that thing you might say is, I know your meds have some side effects, but you can't just take them when you think you need them. Antidepressants don't work that way. They need to be at a therapeutic level, and when you only take them every few days, you're at non-therapeutic levels, and so you are getting all of the side effects and none of the benefit. So what would feel good about saying something like this to a teen?
Nothing. Well, that would be good to say to them.
Yeah.
I would just ask them, well, don't you feel better when you're more even instead of up and down? Or I don't know. I don't really talk to them about their meds. Just the one, Jay, he's up in the morning. I always ask him, how did you feel this morning? And he says, well, let me have meds kick in and then I'll tell you. I would say, fair enough.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think we can take, even if it wasn't antidepressants, it could be getting a full 8 hours of sleep in this example.
Or eating something.
Eating something, eating breakfast. Maybe we'll swap out eating breakfast
Yeah.
for this example. So I know when you get up in the morning, you don't eat breakfast, and breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and you'll really feel a lot better if you eat breakfast, and you'll focus better in school, and you'll feel better, and your energy won't crash during the day. So it's super important that you eat breakfast. Saying breakfast instead of antidepressants.
How would it feel if you looked in the refrigerator and saw if there was something you wanted to eat?
Yeah, so that's a great open-ended question. How would it feel or what would it be like to look in the fridge and see something you wanted to eat? But let's go back to this. So how do we first elicit from the youth what information they have about breakfast?
Are you hungry? Would you care for something to eat?
Yes. Checking to see if they're hungry. Are you hungry this morning? That's a great place to start.
Or maybe more generally, like, normally, are you hungry in the morning?
Yeah.
Is this a hungry time for you in the morning?
Finding out if this is just a one-off that they're not eating breakfast today, or is that what they feel is really normal for themselves?
A lot of times in the morning, I'll just start with, do you drink coffee? Because I'm not opposed to making it for them, but most of them don't, so.
And maybe, what's your normal morning routine? Does it include coffee and or food? Yeah, I think the other thing, so one of our goals is what information do they have? So here, maybe the advice that we would give is breakfast is the most important today. You should eat breakfast. You say, what do you know about how eating regularly throughout the day affects humans or affects people?
Or what did you say, like, how do you feel when you don't eat breakfast? Like,
Whether you
times
feel
you
better
have
when
it?
you eat in the morning or not, or.
Yeah, how does eating or not affect the way you feel during the day? Yeah. Yeah, so we want to figure out where they're at in terms of, for instance, breakfast. And then we want to figure out if they're open to hearing the information we have to say. Would it be helpful to learn more about the way food affects your well-being? What else could we say to gauge whether they have information that they think could be helpful for them?
My question is usually, are you not eating because you don't want to make it, or are you not eating because you're not hungry? Because there's a different, like my son will be like, oh, I don't want to eat because I'm too lazy to make it.
Can we say, like, is there a reason that you don't feel like having breakfast right now?
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah.
Not is there, but yeah, what's the reason you don't feel like eating right now?
Yeah, so what is the reason? Yeah.
Or you could even, especially with the neurons, could say stuff like, we would like all the teens here to feel comfortable to use the kitchen, to prepare what they need for their breakfast and lunch.
Yeah, so you can definitely say, offer that as like a place where you want them to feel comfortable.
The safe thing again.
Safe, yeah.
I know there's been a few mornings where no one's hungry until I volunteer to make something, and then they're all hungry.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe so what do they want? Maybe they just want someone to make them breakfast. I love it when someone makes me breakfast, right? It really makes me a lot more likely to eat. Would you eat if there was food on the table right now? What food could be on the table right now that would make you want to eat it, if any? And again, it's okay to say if any, or maybe there is food and maybe there isn't food that would help you want to eat it, and couch it. So it's okay if they're also nah, I never eat breakfast. I don't like breakfast.
Like would you like to know some like quick options I go to for breakfast when I don't feel like making it or something?
Yeah, that's a great one. Would you like to know some quick things I use?
We're talking about this like from the physiological type of a thing, there's, but there might be a real emotional thing with teens because of what they've come out of in their homes where mealtime was very, very chaotic, or there was a lot of negative feedback from parents. Maybe the parents weren't getting along, or maybe an older sibling and one of the parents, and they just, that was the battleground right there at the table.
Right.
So we need to find out if this is where they're at with food. Does it elicit anxiety?
That's true. It could, taking that trauma-informed care lens, it's really good of you, Benny, that you're thinking about, like, so what is in their background that might make this difficult for them or might make this a struggle? And I think, so again, it's really none of our role except our therapist to be like, so how did, like, your parents fighting affect you emotionally? But using that knowledge, we can ask things like, would it be helpful to talk about ways that you might be more comfortable eating breakfast? Or would you be open to exploring what other environments in this building or spaces in this building would make it easier for you to eat? Or, and maybe as they take their plate out to the backyard, or eat it at the bar stools instead of the table. But I think that's really important to be able to acknowledge that it might not just be they got up and they're too lazy to make themselves food.
Yeah, could be too.
Which it also could be, right? Yeah. And so after we get their permission to share that, would you be open to talking about places that would be more comfortable? Can I share with you a quick meal prep option? And we can provide that information. So Sam, how might you provide that information to them in a way that's concise and offering?
So I have a go-to morning breakfast thing. It's usually oatmeal, which I know is not everyone's favorite. So sometimes maybe yogurt and granola is pretty easy to prepare. Sometimes banana and peanut butter and toast is something that's not too hard to prepare, and you still get a meal going to get you going for the day or something like that.
Yeah, so in that, Sam almost literally used a menu, right? She's offering ideas. She said, I do this, but you'd also do this, that, or the other. She keeps it relatively quick. And so the next step, after we give this list of breakfast options, we want to hear what they think about it.
Can we be real specific again, too? And by saying, like, I find I have better coping skills through the day by starting with some good fuel in my body.
Yeah, and so
my emotions are just not triggered like they would be if I was not having any kind of.
Yeah, so that's definitely a type of information you could provide in this. I think the advice that our workbook's giving us about that is to sort of not even make it. You don't want to make it super personal to them and super personal to you, but you can say, I know for a lot of people, when they don't eat breakfast, it's easier for them to get like irritable through the day. Or it's really common for people who go long periods without eating that their blood sugar crashes, or it makes it harder for them to use their coping skills. So I would recommend to make it less personal, either personal to you or personal to the teen, but you can still share it like as like a normalized piece of information, if that makes sense. Yeah, so Sam gives the thing and then like, do any of those options sound like they might work for you? Or,
would you hear more, or covered? Just again, we're trying to get that feedback. Was this helpful? Was it not? Is there something else that would be helpful for you?
I'm probably going off track, but that's because I'm thinking of other people going off track, and maybe how important is it to try to help people stay on topic, because I can see with either the meds thing or with the breakfast thing. With the breakfast thing, it's really easy to be like, well, they don't even have any food that I want here anyways. And then blah, 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 the house, blah, 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 blah. Like, just start down this road of bad-mouthing all the things instead of like, okay, we're talking about breakfast now, like, how can I help you with that? Like, do we then jump into this other bigger generalized conversation? And then like with the meds, like, well, the doctor's stupid anyways, or they don't even work and I don't like them, or
Side effects, I don't like the side effects.
like,
I hear that one a lot.
yeah.
So I think that's where we go back to what information do they have and what do they want. So I think it's definitely appropriate to be like, hey, we were having this conversation about breakfast options, and now we're talking about everything that's wrong with food at the house. Would it be okay if we started talking about breakfast again?
Oh. You would just say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are so awesome.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna go away now.
So I think it's,
You're scaring me.
yeah. So like, and it's okay if they say no. It's like, no, blah, 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 blah. And that's going to happen too. But I think it's okay to, the one place where I think it can be okay to direct is like redirecting back to a conversation. And again, offering them the option, are we going to continue in this conversation or not? But you can still acknowledge to them, hey, we were talking about this and now we're like way over here. Like, you want to get back there or not? And again, they might say no.
Okay.
Yeah, does that feel like something that you could use?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I like, it makes sense. I just don't think of.
In the moment.
I'm
It's
just
hard to
like,
remember.
alright, I'm gonna go leave now then. You're just like, I don't know what to tell you about that, but that's not what we're talking about, so yeah.
Yeah, and like it's, I mean, sure, I can talk about this in the training, but like I don't, when take my shift on Thursday morning, it's not gonna be like this, right? And so like also be kind to yourself, and like it's a huge deal that you guys all showed up today and you're working on the skills, and you know, it will probably get easier over time. You might find that like, oh, in my 4-hour shift, I had 2 sentences that felt like really good MI, and that's a victory, right? Like it's, personally, I'm never going to be able to carry this the whole 4 hours of a shift at the house, but you know, you could be really proud of yourself if you're able to have a couple.
But it's also nice to feel it happening
Yes.
in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You said, and I find myself practicing it. And every once in a while, my daughter says to me, she's got 2 grandchildren, and she, of course, I raised her, and she says, every once in a while, she says, who are you? And what did they do to my mother?
Right. Yeah. So practice it in your own lives and test it out, and practice it with the youth. And it's okay if you make mistakes, and they'll forgive you for it. And you know, the goal is that not that we have this 2-hour training and then, wow, you're an expert at MI, 100%, creating all this beautiful change in the youth, your conversations alone, oh, that's awesome, that'd be cool, but that we're building up our skills over time and moving closer and closer to embodying the spirit of MI.
You know, well, we have to be careful that we don't lose us.
Right.
Because otherwise, we're going to be all speaking the same format, and they're going to recognize the words, you know.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, she sounds like the other one. Because I'm there on Friday nights, and a lot of the times teens will say, who's coming in after you? And I go, I never know. How do I know? You know.
I told the same thing. I'm like, I'm lucky I got me here.
And then one of them said to me, oh, I hope it's not so-and-so. And then another teen goes, yeah, because that one really takes her job way too serious. I mean, you would not believe the way she acts here. And I'm going, this is for the night shift, you know, the graveyard. And I'm going, oh. I go, well, maybe that's just their personality. Maybe it has nothing to do with the house. Yeah, but they shouldn't have people like that here. I go, oh. And I'm going, what? You know? So there's something that they do look at things in people's personality.
They don't like rules, though.
Right.
I mean, you know, in some ways, this person takes it too seriously. I know there are other things that they say about people or workers or volunteers or whatever. But in some ways, some of the objections are about the house rules, which are in many ways for safety and time management.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think of the rules, that's the one thing I really see big there. With my own children, when they were little, they had a ton of rules. And as they got older, I took away rules until they were finally ready to be their own adults. These kids are coming from where they didn't have those rules and it was really unsafe, and now we need to put them in place, and it's pretty late in the game. So I just feel like they're like wild horses that we're trying to corral and drive into these little pens, and man, the poor kids just have this bad perspective. Yeah, it's not that piece of it's not a natural process. And I don't know how we'll ever get to where they go, I love being corralled as a wild horse. Best day of my life today. You guys put a rope around my neck. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are a licensed facility, and so some of them are, like you said, Wendy, just for time management or our safety, and then a lot of them are licensing requirements too that the state makes us have. But
I use that excuse almost every single time. Yes, you're all over 18. However, in order for the house to stay open, they have to follow state regulations for their, and I said it last night, they are a licensed child care provider, and they laughed in my face and they go, the certificate is right there. They have to follow certain rules, and they're like, this is stupid, stop talking to us, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's the reason. It's not because I'm making it up and I'm being a hard ass. Like, that's the reason.
for sure. Okay.
I guess go back to that. The one thing I keep coming back to is collaborative as far as the redirecting the conversation and stuff. A lot of times it doesn't feel that way when we're talking to them, but whoever's talking is the least powerful person. Whoever's listening is the most powerful person in communication. Because you can say whatever you want to say, but I can ignore you.
You're just a gem of like.
Well, no, I think that's where I just saw it when they did the elicit, provide, elicit. It's like jujitsu we're doing on them. We're demonstrating that we care to them. At the same time, we're putting ourselves in a more powerful position as far as if there's real communication happening.
Right.
And I feel like that's that piece with the collaboration. The hard piece is that so many of them are wearing these pretend masks all the time because they're afraid to show who they really are. And that's the piece today.
Yeah, I generally resonate with what you're saying, and I think that's why under this model and the evocation as well, like we want to hear from them what's going on, because like you said, we can talk at them till we're blue in the face, but then their power is just, am I going to listen to this person or not? Right. Whereas if we are thoughtful and are listening to them and understanding them and resisting our writing reflex, then we can start to really, when we do talk, when we are in that provide the information, then what we're saying, maybe they're actually open to. Maybe they're actually going to listen and hear what we're saying and be able to integrate that into their lives.
Some of the conversations I've had with the kids, I always tell staff about, because some of them are very important. I almost feel like I'm telling on them. Mm-hmm. And then when staff tells them, well, she told me this, and they're like, you're not going to tell me anything again. And I know that's because there's been some really monumental conversations I've had in the morning, and I do tell staff, where they're case person, but it's like, God, I feel like I'm telling on them. I don't want them, but I do continue to tell because it's important. But because one of the teens got up in the morning and was asking me a lot of questions about being pregnant, and then wanting to know about where she could get pregnancy tests. So I felt that this was a huge conversation we were having, but so I felt like I was telling on her at the end, and I was like, she's never going to say anything to me again.
When you do have those conversations with the youth and they share something with you and you're like, wow, the case manager or the advocate or the program really needs to hear this. And, one way, and so I'm over in my little Zoe house program. We got 5 beds, but, when I'm on call or on shift at the house or whatever, you hear these things. So there's just what I do is I find it really helpful to just acknowledge that to the youth I'm talking with. So, wow, this is a really big conversation. I'll just so you know, I'm gonna just check in with Krista about this so she's aware of what's going on.
You've talked to Krista about this so that she's aware and can help you make these
Yeah.
appointments or get to them if
Or,
you need to.
or even I'd like to make sure that you're able to be connected to the resources you need
Well,
around this. And so,
we looked up
yeah.
phone numbers on the internet, and I gave her some phone numbers to call and some people she could talk to, and then I talked to Krista, of course, and was
Yeah.
like, you should really talk to her.
Yeah, like, it's important to me that you get all the resources and support you need around this. So I'm gonna share some of what we talked about with Krista.
And luckily, this person was really open about it with everyone. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a big deal, but at the time, it was like, God, I'm telling her.
Yeah.
Like, that'll-
Yeah. So we have about half an hour. I think that it'd be appropriate to take a little break. So you can go to the bathroom, stretch your legs, then we'll come back and we're gonna do some role play. Yeah, so what we're gonna do now is a little chance to role play. So Sam and I are gonna go first. I'm gonna share a challenge that I'm working through. Sam's gonna use some of these skills. Hopefully then you guys will help identify which ones of these skills you saw Sam use, and then we'll pair up and you can think of a real problem in your life that maybe someone that you feel like you could use advice on, even though you're not going to get it. I'll just sit over here so we can share the mic.
All right. Hey, Katie. What's going on today?
Yeah, so I've been having this problem for a while, and I just am not getting enough sleep. And I stay up too late, and I wake up in the morning, and I'm just exhausted, and, I just am running myself ragged, and I know that I would just feel better if I was sleeping more.
Okay. What do you think's going on with your sleep?
What do I think's going on with my sleep? Well, I'm not getting enough of it is definitely the thing. I do feel like I know what I would need to do to sleep better, which is go to bed earlier. Pretty sure that would help me. So, when I tell other people I need to go to sleep, they're just like, oh, well, how late did you go to bed? And I'm like, oh, well, like 12:30. And they're like, oh, you should have gone to bed earlier. And I'm like, yes. But, it's really hard to make change.
So one thing you could do is go to sleep earlier.
I could go to sleep earlier. That would give me more sleep.
Okay. What have you tried in the past that's been helpful for your sleep?
Wow. So, I've tried some stuff. I've tried, setting an alarm on my phone at, 10 or something to, remind myself to start moving towards bed. And, that works for a couple days. But then, I don't know, I just start ignoring it or turn it off. I've tried to, not use my phone or my laptop as much before bed, but I just, like being on my phone and my laptop, and so I don't. So I guess those are some of the things I've tried. And then I used to try just, being able to sleep in a lot later in the morning, but just my work schedule is not allowing that for me.
Okay. Would it be helpful for you to know some things that help other people go to sleep better or go to sleep earlier?
Yeah, it'd probably be helpful.
Okay. Can I tell you some of those things?
Okay, I guess you could tell me some of those things.
Okay. You don't want to hear them.
Well, I feel like I know that I just need to go to bed earlier, but if you have other stuff I could do, I guess I'd be open to hearing it.
Okay. Well, you talked about setting an alarm and stuff like that and not using your laptop, so those are things you obviously already know. What do you think about, I know I've heard not using your bed unless you're going to sleep, that sometimes help, only use your bed when you're going to sleep. Another thing is having a nighttime routine, when your alarm goes off, maybe you go and you drink some sleepy time tea or something like that, and then you have sort of a routine you follow when you get in bed. What do you think of those sorts of things?
Oh, well, I'm not in my bed a ton when I'm not asleep, but, you're right, I don't have a very good routine, and maybe it would be helpful if I tried to figure out something I could do, even if it was just having tea every night, if a routine was going to help me sleep better.
Okay.
There was a menu there.
Okay, so there is a menu.
She offered ideas.
She asked permission.
We asked permission. Yeah, and
Open-ended questions.
open-ended question. And one thing I want to say about permission is, so she asked permission. I was sort of like, yeah, I guess. And she was able to sort of reflect that I was saying, yeah, I would listen to, but like I wasn't really into listening it. I was like, I guess. And she used that as an opportunity to sort of acknowledge that I maybe did have some skills, or I tried something like that didn't really work for me, like not using my phone right before bed, and was like, oh, I don't need to tell you about that. You already know that, but here's maybe a different strategy that could be a gap. Does that make sense?
It was like halfway through,
have to run.
and I literally
Sorry.
thought, you're not helping her at all. And then I was like, oh, that's the point.
Right. Okay, so what else did you notice in what Sam said to me?
She didn't put you down at all. Like, you were saying very basic things, and she was just like, all right, like, okay.
Yeah, so she didn't judge me for it. So, like, it would be easy to say, oh, well, sounds like you do know what you gotta do. Better just go do it. And she didn't do that.
Well, you should just go to bed early then.
Yeah.
If you already know it, then just do it. Buck up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and she was able to hear me say, well, I know what the right thing is, and it's just, like, not realistic for it to happen for me. But she was still able to offer different strategies, like have the routine. Don't just hang out in your bed, use it only for sleep, those things. And not circle back to the, like, you're right, you should be setting an alarm at 10 to go to bed. And
Why did that work for you? Why did you stop doing it?
Right. Right. She didn't
Use an alarm?
Yeah, she didn't dwell on those things that I shared already didn't work for me. And she asked the questions to find out whether that was working. She spent a lot of time in that illicit space, right? Figuring out where I was at, what had I tried, like what did I already know, that sort of thing. Anything else?
She didn't put an expectation for, like, okay, and then so tonight you're gonna start doing that, right?
Right. She didn't.
You should be getting 8 hours by this time next week.
Yeah. Right. She didn't say, like, oh, well, now we've solved it, and I have the expectation you're going to do it. I think.
Now you solved it, and I'll see you next week.
Right. Exactly. Check. I think if we had continued the conversation, so this is sort of talking about that initial part, I think then eventually we want to build the skills to help someone through that planning process. But that's like another set of MI skills altogether, right? But a lot of that planning process could go along with like their case manager or something. It doesn't all have to happen in the same conversation, right? I do want you guys to know that using even some of these reflective listening and open-ended questions, it can be a way to help someone develop those plans, like actionable plans. But often we talk about stages of change where someone's like pre-contemplative or like they're in the denial, they don't see their problem. Contemplation, so they see that there's a problem or they see that there's a change they want to make, but they're just like going back and forth about it. Or exploring their options of what they could do. Your whole life, right. People spend a lot of time, and people in this stage, they like to talk about it. They'll talk about it till they're blue in the face, but they're not ready. And then you go to the planning and action stage. But, you know, it can take weeks, months, years to move from, like, the contemplation, what are my reasons for change? What have I tried before? What might I try in the future? And actually, like, okay, so today I'm going to go to City Market and buy Sleepy Time tea, and I'm going to set out my routine, and it's going to be like take a shower, put on my PJs, drink the tea, do whatever, and like, yeah, so it was probably at the point where I'm at now, I'm not really ready to commit to driving to City Market on my way home and getting the tea. I'm not ready for that planning stage. So the fact that Sam was able to just sit with me and exploring it was really valuable.
I just let you continue to complain and listen to your complaining and help you continue to think on your own about maybe in the future there would be some options to do something different.
Perfect. Yes.
So one of the things I do with my own kid, and have done it with a few kids is I encourage them to look things up on the internet
Yeah.
and find out their own information, because as a general rule, I'm pretty sure my son thinks I'm full of shit.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
but like if I tell him something, it's like, if it's on the internet, God, it must be true. So I do that a lot. Like one of the teens kept talking about emancipation
Right.
at the house, and I said, well, you should look that up, what that means to you here in Colorado.
Yeah, you
'Cause
can't do it in
means-
Colorado.
It means different things in different states, and you don't have any rights in Colorado. But she didn't want to hear that from me.
Right.
But I encouraged her to look this up. So that's what
Yeah.
Empower is a big thing for me, because
Yeah.
I don't want to sit and tell them about my past, because that's not a good example. So I am more encouraged her to say, well, look this up.
Right.
Find out about it.
Yeah, so the eliciting is, what do you know about this? What do you want to know? And then the provide might be, I know that this information is available if you Google it. Like,
Right.
sometimes that's what provide means, is like, go look for that on the internet,
So
or
my
ask
job,
that person.
We're not the source of the information, we're the source of the source.
That's okay. That's
Yeah, I don't
that's
wanna
okay.